The black presidential vehicle cut through the dawn like a predator, not the usual symbol of state authority, but an instrument of clandestine purpose. Inside, President Ibrahim Traoré, clad in unassuming dark brown, his face a mask of contained intensity, gripped a silent resolve tighter than any official decree. His destination was not a diplomatic meeting or a public address, but the grim edifice of Ouagadougou's Central Correctional Center. Only his driver knew. This wasn't a scheduled visit. It was an intrusion into the shadows. The prison gates loomed, gray and bristling with wire, guardians of forgotten lives. The guards, startled from their routine, fumbled with disbelief, then recognition. "Mr. President," one stammered, scrambling. "Open it," Traoré commanded, his voice low, impatient. "No fanfare. I'm here to see, not be seen." Director Pascal, a man whose skin seemed perpetually slick with anxiety, hurried out, his usual practiced cordiality dissolving into confusion. "Sir, an honor, but unannounced? We could have prepared." "Precisely why I am here, Director," Traoré said, stepping past him into the suffocating air, heavy with dust and something sourly stagnant. "I need no prepared facade. Take me to the prisoners. I will speak with them, truly speak." Pascal, his protests dying on his lips, led the way into the echoing concrete maze. The main yard was a theater of stagnation. Listless card games, figures slumped against walls, quiet murmurs of prayer. Hundreds of eyes turned as the small group entered, shock rippling through the crowd. Traoré walked among them, extending a hand, his gaze direct, disarmingly human. He asked names, years served, the bare bones of their stories. Most responded with guarded suspicion, wary of a fleeting curiosity from power. Yet his patient presence began to wear down the walls they had built. Then, in the deepest recess of a small cell, he saw him, not just present, but absent, hunched over, radiating in profound stillness that went beyond mere exhaustion, the heavy cloak of one who had ceased expecting anything from the world. Traoré approached, the din of the prison fading around this quiet core of despair. "Your name?" A slow, painful lift of the head. Eyes met his, not just sad, but utterly empty, like burnt-out stars. "Emmanuel," a voice scraped, brittle with disuse. "How long?" "7 years, sir." "A lifetime?" "The charge?" Emmanuel swallowed, the sound loud in the silence. "They said theft from my employer. Lies, sir, all lies. He wanted my place for his nephew. I was poor, no voice, no lawyer. Who listens to a man like me?" Traoré studied the ravaged face. There was no practiced plea, only a deep-seated weariness. "Why no appeal?" "No money. My wife. She left. The children gone. 7 years. Not a single visitor. Just forgotten." A heavy silence settled, even the guards shifting uncomfortably. Traoré stood, the weight of those 7 years pressing down. Then, quietly, firmly, "I believe you, Emmanuel." Pascal paled. "Mr. President, surely we must follow—" "You will bring me his file," Traoré cut him off, his voice hardening. "Every detail. Who accused, who judged, before sunset today. I want the truth of this matter, not the official version." He looked back at Emmanuel, a flicker of something strong igniting in those empty eyes. "Your story isn't over. Not yet." Leaving the prison, Traoré's instructions were sharp. "Cancel everything. To the Ministry of Justice. Now." The black car sped away, carrying the weight of a promise and a burgeoning anger. At the ministry, an emergency session crackled with tension. "A man, Emmanuel," Traoré declared, his voice tight, "lost 7 years to a lie. No defense, no voice. Our system buried him. This is not incompetence, it is rot. His case is reopened, immediately. An independent task force, uncorruptible. Within hours, the task force, a mix of sharp legal minds and human rights advocates, began digging. But the simple truth they expected was buried under layers of deliberate obfuscation. Files were incomplete, key documents missing, the original arresting officer unavailable. This wasn't just neglect, it was active concealment. Emmanuel's employer, Laurent Guéret, a powerful businessman, had not just framed him, but seemed to have orchestrated a swift, silent, legal execution. Yet hints emerged of something larger: financial discrepancies in Guéret's company, connections to officials dismissed years ago for irregularities. The frame-up of Emmanuel looked less like a simple land grab and more like a way to silence a witness or consolidate power connected to something far more significant and illegal. The task force hit walls. Anonymous threats were made. A key witness suddenly disappeared. It became clear they weren't just fighting a past injustice, but a present conspiracy. This was the true test. Traoré himself met with the task force daily, pushing, protecting, navigating the hidden currents of influence resisting their efforts. The report that landed on his desk wasn't just about Emmanuel's innocence. It detailed a network, a systematic abuse of the justice system tied to Guéret's illicit activities and facilitated by corrupt elements still embedded within power structures. The poorly worded confession was a template, used on others too. The presiding judge hadn't just been bribed, he was part of a pattern. The following morning, Traoré returned to the prison, this time with the national media in tow. The cameras rolled as he entered Emmanuel's cell. But today, the weight was mixed with purpose, a steely resolve hardened by the discovered truth. "Emmanuel," he said, his voice echoing for the nation, "your file is here. We found not just your innocence, but the deliberate corruption that put you here." He met Emmanuel's stunned gaze. "You were a pawn in a much larger, much darker game. And the system failed you profoundly. On behalf of Burkina Faso, I am truly sorry." Emmanuel stared, breathing shallowly, the words barely registering. "Today, you walk free, Emmanuel," the president announced, a rare, fierce light in his eyes. "Not just from this cell, but from the lie they tried to bury you in." A collective gasp rose from the watching inmates and guards. Tears finally coursed down Emmanuel's face, not of sorrow, but of a bewildered, fragile hope. "Is this real?" he whispered, the word a prayer. "It is real, Emmanuel," Traoré affirmed, a hand on his shoulder. "It is real." Stepping into the blinding sun, Emmanuel blinked at a world he no longer knew. He was gaunt, adrift, carrying nothing but 7 years of absence. Journalists swarmed. "How do you feel?" He looked at the endless sky, his eyes now holding not emptiness, but a raw vulnerability. "Lost," he admitted softly. "But seen." Traoré stayed by his side, shielding him from the frenzy, personally ensuring he was housed and cared for. For the first time in 7 years, Emmanuel slept without the smell of dust and despair. The next day at the palace, Traoré listened as Emmanuel recounted his life before prison, the simple aspirations crushed. "Life throws cruel turns, Emmanuel," the president said. "But you survived. Now you help us fix it." At a televised press conference, Traoré stood with Emmanuel before the nation. "Emmanuel is not a criminal," he stated, his voice resonating. "He is a survivor, a witness, and he is now part of a new task force, Operation Justice Light, dedicated to exposing and dismantling the corruption that imprisoned him and countless others, tied to the very powerful interests we uncovered in his case." Applause erupted. Emmanuel, standing taller now, a spark in his eyes, represented not just a freed man, but a weapon forged in injustice. He was no longer the forgotten, he was the remembered, the catalyst. The news was seismic. While headlines hailed Emmanuel's freedom, the underlying message was the fight against entrenched corruption. Traoré instructed his ministers, audit every long-term case, every missing file, every questionable conviction. This rot goes deep. We will pull it out, root and branch. Emmanuel, disoriented by the modern world, found purpose in the task force. Armed with the pain of his own experience, he meticulously documented cases, his notebook titled simply, Scene. Their first major investigation took them to Bobo Dioulasso, uncovering not just wrongful imprisonment, but systemic bribery to keep certain individuals silenced or incarcerated. Resistance intensified. Threats became more direct. Anonymous leaks attempted to discredit the task force. Powerful figures, their corrupt empires threatened, struck back from the shadows. "They're exposing everything," the whispers went. "The president has gone too far." But Traoré remained resolute. "Justice is not a negotiation," he stated publicly. "It is an absolute. We will not stop." In a national address, asked about his personal involvement, Traoré's expression was grim. Because justice is the air a free nation breathes. When it is poisoned, we all suffocate. Emmanuel wasn't just one man. He was a mirror showing us how broken we were. We choose now to heal. Letters poured in, not just pleas, but denunciations of complicit officials, hidden testimonies. One, from a woman named Aminata, spoke of her brother, incarcerated for a minor offense, and then disappeared into a labor camp associated with Guéré's hidden operations, uncovered during the investigation. This led Operation Justice Light to a remote site disguised as an agricultural project. What they found was horrific. Men held without trial, forced into labor under brutal conditions, a direct extension of the same criminal enterprise Guéré oversaw. Among them was Aminata's brother, skeletal but alive. The discovery was a national shock, exposing the full depravity tied to the system that had framed Emmanuel. Laurent Guéré's trial became the focal point of the nation's reckoning, not just for theft, but for conspiracy, forced labor, obstruction of justice, and systematic corruption. Emmanuel testified, his voice clear and unwavering, recounting not just his own framing, but connecting it to the wider pattern of abuse the task force had unearthed. Facing Guéré and the now arrested corrupt judge, Emmanuel spoke with quiet power. "You tried to erase me for 7 years, but you only showed the world the darkness you operate in. And now, the light is here." Guéré was convicted, his network dismantled. A year after that clandestine prison visit, Justice Day was celebrated. Hundreds of freed individuals stood, living testaments to change. Emmanuel, now a symbol and a driving force behind ongoing reforms, addressed the nation. "I was lost in the silence. Now we ensure no voice is unheard. Justice is not a gift to be given, it is a right to be claimed. Let us never be silent again." Later, Traoré and Emmanuel sat overlooking the city. "The fight is not over," Traoré acknowledged. "Corruption is like a stubborn weed." Emmanuel, his eyes reflecting a hard-won peace, nodded. "Then we become the gardeners, Mr. President. Always vigilant, always tending the soil of truth." The next morning, Emmanuel stood outside his old cell. A simple brass plaque was affixed. Here, for 7 years, a truth was buried. From here, it rose. He closed the door softly on the past, stepping into the bright Burkina Faso sun, a future not just for himself, but for a nation slowly mending its soul. The chains were broken, the conspiracy exposed, and the light of justice, however fragile, was growing.